Hello everyone, my name is Vangeris, and today I'll be taking you through Skyrim while talking about anything and everything on our way to becoming Harbinger of the Companions. As I previously mentioned, we'll be tackling different parts of Skyrim's questlines in separate videos. Here's a reference for when we're tackling what. One point I neglected to make clear in the previous videos was that the first 10 videos in this series are focusing on the walkthrough aspect, where I show you the game while throwing out opinions and criticisms as we go. These sections are focusing on showing and explaining the content more so than critiquing every aspect of it. We'll dive into a heavy analysis of the game in the final video, so if you're expecting more analysis during the walkthrough section, you may find it lacking. That's intentional, so I ask that you be patient while I work on the final part of this series. It's looking to be a monster of a video, but let's get back on track. Today we'll be tackling the Companions questline and several of the features that the questline holds. Timestamps for each quest in this chain can be found in the description, as well as my critical analysis playlist where you can find the rest of the Skyrim series once they're all uploaded, and my other analytical content. Finally, feel free to leave a comment with your stories, opinions, and criticisms as this goes on, as I'm sure you've got a lot to say about this one way or another. It helps me iron out the kinks in future videos by letting me know if I get anything wrong, word things poorly, or generally suck at something and need to improve. I welcome the comments and criticism. Now let's dive into the Companions questline. Before we jump into the Companions questline proper, we'll have to reach them in Whiterun. As such, we'll meet our boy Smack the Fuck Out of You and escape Helgen. For this run, we'll be two-handing, because there's no better way to smack your foes down than with giant weaponry. Before we go, a quick thing I found amusing. We'll finish Unbound and run back into Helgen, where we'll find a glitched Velod, Raelof's gay lover or transitioner, take your pick, who we can ask where we can learn magic. He says the College of Winterhold and says to not let him get in our way. I have no idea why he talks about the college or why he's glitched out, but hey, Bethesda's never been known to fix all the bugs you find. Anyway, we'll run into the Ember Shard mine near Riverwood to grab some smithing materials and get some skills up before moving on. One thing I like about this mine is how it's located along the path the main questline takes you down, so it's tough to miss and very useful to find early game for skills and loot. Once it's mined drier than a desert rock, we'll head to Riverwood proper and go through the motions with the main questline along Hadvar's side for smithing goodies. We'll also grab the Golden Claw quest and head up to the Barrow to grab it. We'll complete the Golden Claw quest and head to Whiterun, where we'll find some companions attacking a giant. We'll head up to help, but they kill it before we reach it. That doesn't stop Ayla the Huntress from insulting us for not helping, which is a terrible design choice to give the player a 90% chance to fail to help with this, given how quickly they can take out the giant. Plus it doesn't help make the characters likable when they initially appear unreasonable. Anyway, we'll say we tried our best, but Ayla insults us again as a milk drinker, really becoming a fan favorite early as you can tell. Then we'll ask about the companions, and Ayla explains that they are an order of warriors, brothers and sisters in honor, and show up to solve problems if the coin is good enough. Basically a more honorable and respected group of mercenaries by that description. We'll ask if we can join, but Ayla says that's not for her to say. We'll have to talk to Codlac Whitemane and Jorvaskr. Ayla says he's got a good sense for people, and can look someone in the eye and tell their worth. Jorvaskr is the Companions' Hall in Whiterun. It also serves as their base of operations in Skyrim, which is handy, as the player can encounter it early given the main quest chain, or they can find it in a central location that they're likely to reach at some point regardless. Before we head to the hall, we'll work on our smithing skill a bit. We'll farm iron daggers and then move up to Jorvaskr. We'll enter the hall and find two of the companions fighting. They're very brawly, as you'll see from the characters' demeanors. We'll head down into the bowels of Jorvaskr, and we'll meet Codlac talking to Vilkas. Vilkas says he hears the call of the blood, with Codlac saying they all hear it, as it is their burden to bear, but they can overcome it. Vilkas says that Codlac has his brother and Vilkas, but they don't know if the rest will go along quite so easily. Codlac says to leave that to him. This hints at things we'll learn later in the chain. When we talk to Codlac proper, we'll ask to join the companions. He'll look us over, saying we have a certain strength of spirit. Vilkas says he can't consider accepting us, before Codlac says that he's nobody's master, and at last he checked, they had some empty beds in Jorvaskr for those with a fire burning in their hearts. Vilkas apologizes, then says that this may not be the time, as he's never heard of us. Codlac says that sometimes the famous come to them, and those seeking fame come to them, but what is in their heart is what matters, with Vilkas adding what their arm can do matters as well. Codlac will ask how we fare in battle, and we'll say we have much to learn. Then he says Vilkas will get us started, and we're pointed to head out to the courtyard for a test, as we head into the first real quest of the Companions' questline. We'll talk to Vilcus outside, and he'll tell us to take a few swings at him. Be careful when attacking him during this section, because certain damage types can screw up the interaction and quest progression. The most annoying factor is enchanted weapons. Anything applying non-physical damage has Vilcus say that's unacceptable, and you'll have to change weapons or punch him. It's annoying when one of the basics of combat has to be adjusted just for an encounter where you don't need to kill anyone anyway. They could have just let it happen normally, but we got what we got. Anyway, Vilcus says we might just make it, but for now we're still a whelp to the rest of them, so we'll have to do what they tell us to do. He'll point us to take his sword to Yorlin to have it sharpened, saying to be careful, as it's probably worth more than we are. We'll head up to Yorlin Greymane, the guy Alvor mentioned way back when regarding Skyforge steel, as he manages the forge for the companions and is renowned for his smithing skill. Anyway, we'll ask if Vilcus always sends newcomers on errands, and Yorlin tells us not to worry about it. They were all whelps once, even if they might not like to talk about it. Then he tells us not to always do what we're told, as nobody rules anybody in the companions. We'll ask how that works, and Yorlin says that they've had no leaders since Ysgramor, but then he mentions that Kodlak is the harbinger and a sort of advisor for the whole group, but every man and woman are their own person. We'll ask Yorlin if he's a companion, and he says he's not, but none of them know how to work a forge properly, so he's honored to serve them. Then he formally introduces himself, saying he works the Skyforge and that it's the best steel in all of Tamriel. When we're ready to leave, he'll ask a favor. We need to deliver a shield to Ayla. He mentions that his wife is in mourning, and that he needs to get back to her soon. We'll agree to deliver the shield, and we'll bring it to Ayla. We'll find her talking to Skjor, where he's complaining of all the younglings scampering around, and potentially getting themselves killed. Then we'll deliver the shield, and Ayla says she remembers seeing us. Skjor mentions seeing us with Vilcus in the courtyard, and Ayla says we gave him quite a thrashing. She'll ask if we think we could best Vilcus in a real fight, but we don't care for boasting. Then she'll call Farkas, Vilcus's brother, and he'll show us where we'll be resting our head. Farkas arrives and says that Skjor and Ayla like to tease him, but they're good people who challenge us to be our best. He says it's nice to have a new face, as it gets boring around here. Then he says we can pick a bed and fall in it when we're tired. Tilma keeps the place clean, and we're all set. Then he says to come to him or Ayla if we're looking for work, and that if we make a name for ourselves, we can then get work from Vilcus and Skjor. Then he welcomes us into the companions, and the quest ends. The next quest begins immediately, as we get word that someone needs some muscle here in Whiterun. All we need to do is go over there, look tough, and scare the milk drinker into submission. Farkas then stresses that we do no more than that, and to avoid a killing. Then we'll head out to intimidate Elrindir. This is the first section where we'll be given a Radiant quest before we can continue the Companion's questline. Radiant quests are basically quests that are randomized to give the player something to do that is repeatable in the future. For example, it'll choose an NPC, Elrindir, and a location, Whiterun, and send us to beat them up. This works for other quests we'll see throughout a lot of the game, and throughout several major questlines later. Anyway, we'll enter the Drunken Huntsman, one of the businesses in Whiterun, and talk to Elrindir. Then we'll start a brawl. Brawling in Skyrim boils down to two people going at it with fists only until one of us drops to a knee. When we get Elrindir to drop to the ground, he says we're tougher than we look, and that we got him fair and square. We'll say that he knows what he has to do, and he agrees to do it and asks us to leave him alone. Then we'll return to Farkas. He mentions how it can be fun to push people around sometimes, before the quest ends, and we head into the next one. We'll ask for work again, and Farkas will say Skjor was looking for us. We'll talk to Skjor, and he says our time has come. He explains that a scholar came to them, as he knew where to find another fragment of Wuthrad. Skjor thought him a fool, but if he's right, the honor of the companions demands we seek it out. We'll say we're honored to retrieve it before Skjor says there's a fine line between respect and bootlicking, but he likes our spirit. He says this will be our trial, and if we do well, we'll be counted among the companions, even though Farkas said we already were one, but whatever. He is the ice-brain of the group. Anyway, Skjor says Farkas will be our shield sibling on this venture, basically our companion, wink wink, and he'll answer any questions we have. We'll speak to Farkas and ask some questions. When asked why Skjor called this our trial, Farkas explains that he is to watch us to make sure we're honorable. We'll ask about the scholar who came to tell us of the blade piece, and Farkas simply says he's going to watch us as we try to retrieve it. Then we'll head to Dustman's Cairn. Somehow they've telepathically let us know where to go, but with that, we'll head out. We'll reach it and then ask Farkas about Wuthrad. He explains that Ysgramor was the hero who started the companions, and Wuthrad was his weapon. He came from the ancient homeland and killed a lot of elves. Farkas isn't too good with storytelling, but we'll get more details on Wuthred as we go. We'll enter the cairn to find a few dead Draugr, and Farkas says someone's been here and was digging recently. We'll fight through Draugr and reach a room with an open area with a gate we'll need to open. When we hit the lever in one of the rooms, it'll open the gate, but trap ourselves. Farkas will look for a release before he's attacked by the Silver Hand. Then Farkas transforms into a werewolf and slaughters the Silver Hand. Then he'll run off, and the gate will open. Then he'll come back as regular Farkas. He hopes he didn't scare us, and explains that it's a blessing given to some of the companions to be fearsome, like wild beasts. When we ask if they're going to make us a werewolf, Farkas assures us that only the Circle have the beast blood, and tells us to focus on proving our honor to be a companion. Eyes on the prey, not the horizon. We'll ask him who the Silver Hand are, and he simply says they're bad people who don't like werewolves. We can ask if the companions are werewolves, and he'll reiterate that only the Circle are, and it's a secret to everybody. Then we'll move on and fight through many more Silver Hand members and Draugr along the path through the crypt. Then we'll fight through some creepy crawlies, and eventually reach the room with the fragment of Wuthred and a word wall with the first word of Fire Breath. Then we'll be attacked by several Draugr. On the subject of word walls, it's a nice detail that if you explore the right places, you can get several shouts that normally appear in other questlines. This works for most shouts in the game, with the only exceptions being ones used for specific parts of quests, or shouts that can only be learned through special encounters. Dragonrend and Clear Skies are two examples of this, where you learn the former from a flashback, and the latter from the Greybeards to meet Paarthurnax. Anyway, we'll kill and loot what we can before we get outside. We'll train in heavy armor from Farkas, and then return to Jorrvaskr. We'll upgrade to a steel armor set, and then talk to the companions as a group in the courtyard. Kodlak welcomes us into their mortal fold, as we have endured, have challenged, and have shown our valor. When asked who will speak for us, Farkas says that he has witnessed our courage. Kodlak will ask if he would raise his shield in our defense, and Farkas says he will stand at our back, that the world might never take us. Then Kodlak asks if he would raise his sword in our honor, with Farkas saying it stands ready to meet the blood of our foes. Then Kodlak asks if he would raise a mug in our name, and Farkas says he'd lead the Song of Triumph, as our mead hall reveled in our stories. Then Kodlak says the judgment of this circle is complete, and that our heart beats with fury and courage that has united the companions since the days of the distant green summers. Then we'll rudely be interrupted by a courier, which is a major problem with the courier system if you're outside doing something and they interrupt dialogue. Back to Kodlak, he says to let our heart beat with theirs, that the mountains may echo and our enemies tremble at the call. Then Kodlak talks to us directly, saying we're one of them now, and trusts that we won't disappoint. Then the quest ends. Before we talk to the leaders for more work, we'll talk to Kodlak some more. We'll mention the werewolf thing, and he says we've been allowed to know some secrets before our appointed time, before confirming it's true. He mentions that some take to it more than others. We'll ask about Kodlak himself, and he says as he grows old, his mind turns toward the horizon and Sovngarde. He worries that Shor won't call an animal to glory, as he would a true Nord warrior. Living as beasts draws their souls closer to the Daedric Lord Hircine. We'll go over Daedric Lords in more detail in a later video. Anyway, Kodlak says some prefer an eternity of Hircine's hunting grounds, but Kodlak craves the fellowship of Sovngarde. When we ask if he's looking to cure himself, he'll confirm so, but it's no easy matter. Then he tells us we don't need to share the worries of an old warrior, as today is a day to rejoice in our bravery. Then he insults our weapon choice, as he tells us to speak to Jorland for something better. We can hear Vilkas giving tips for using two-handed weapons, and someone hearing rumors of Ayla and Skjor, before she tells them to shut up if they want to keep their ears. It's a great detail when the idle chatter of NPCs can breathe life into the characterization and the world building, with this doing both for Vilkas and Ayla. We don't have a major companion's quest to do at the moment, so we'll take some work from one of the leaders. Ayla will mention the Jarl of Falkreath has asked for help, as predators have taken up residence and have been attacking farmers and travelers. Ayla cautions us when we agree to take care of it, saying it's simply a beast, but in Skyrim, they are made of sterner stuff than most. Most companions' quests during these break periods involve going somewhere to defeat an enemy or threat of some kind, or involves brawling with a problematic NPC, among others. They're simple, repeatable quests that we'll get throughout our time with the companions, which can be helpful if you want the extra coin. Anyway, we'll move out to help Falkreath by entering a cave and killing some wolves. We'll also find some iron and gold ore, making this trip quite profitable when all is said and done. We'll return to Ayla to report our success, and then we'll talk to Skjor about more work. He has something special for us, but it's not for everyone to hear. We're to meet him in the Underforge tonight, and the next quest begins. We'll ask where the Underforge is, and it's self-explanatory, as it's beneath the Skyforge where Yorland works. The door is hidden, but Skjor will show us the way. We'll head outside and take some of Yorland's stuff, since he doesn't mind, then we'll talk to him to get a new weapon. He'll say we've been raised into the Companions, and that he can fashion whatever kind of weapon we want. While it's nice to have the options of a sword, dagger, battle axe, greatsword, and war axe, it's a shame you don't get the options for maces. I'm not sure why that is, but you should be able to smith something yourself, or find a weapon if you want a warhammer that badly. Weapon choice aside, we'll pick a greatsword and switch over to it before moving on. We'll wait until nighttime and meet Skjor just outside of the obvious outline in the rock. He'll explain that Jorvaskr is the oldest building in Whiterun, and the Skyforge was here long before it. The Underforge taps an ancient magic older than men or elves. The Companions are bringing us here to make us stronger. We'll enter the Underforge to find a werewolf near a large bull, as Skjor says he's glad we came, as it's been a long time since they had a heart like ours among their numbers. Then he insults the ceremony we just had, as that does not befit warriors like us. He says we're due more honor than calls and feasting. Then he points out the werewolf is Ayla. She definitely let the hair down. She will be our forebearer. Skjor explains that they do this in secret because Kodlak is too busy trying to throw away this great gift they've been granted. Kodlak thinks it's a curse, but Skjor argues how can something that gives this kind of prowess be a curse? I can think of a few reasons, like a very limited afterlife to name one thing Kodlak cares about, among other problems with this. Then Skjor says we must join them in the shared blood of the wolf to reach the heights of the Companions. When we ask about refusing, Skjor says it is our choice, as they will not force us, but to join the circle, our blood must be as theirs. We'll agree to take part in the Fluffy Fan Club, and Skjor will cut Ayla's arm to put blood in the bowl. We'll interact and drink it to trigger our transformation. The beast form is a unique ability that transforms you into a werewolf and gives you increased abilities. You hit harder, run on all fours faster than a regular sprint, and you have increased health. The drawbacks are that your health doesn't regenerate, you can't use any abilities or items outside of beast form abilities like swipe, feed, and so on, you don't gain any skill progression besides feedings for the werewolf tree, and you can't access your inventory. In short, you better be effective as a werewolf, because you've got nothing else helping you. They do have some cool abilities like a howl to cause enemies to flee, and feeding on dead enemies gives health and beast form duration back, among other things. You're limited on time in this form, with the base giving you 150 seconds, but that is boostable with werewolf skill tree perks and feeding on enemies and animals. But you can only use it once a day unless you have the Ring of Hircine, an item we'll see in another video. Anyway, once our time is up, we'll fade to black before reappearing next to Ayla in the woods, where she asks if we're awake. She was worried we wouldn't be coming back, saying our transformation was not an easy one, but we're still alive, and she congratulates us. Probably should have mentioned how wild and risky this is before asking someone to join. Anyway, she'll explain that a celebration is nearby at a werewolf hunter's camp at Gallows Rock. The Silver Hand are there, and we're going to slaughter them, with Skjor scouting ahead. When we ask what happened to us, she says we were born into the pack, mentioning that the first time is the most intense, and that we gave a harder time than even Farkas' first transformation. We'll ask if we're a werewolf now, and Ayla says we have the blood of the wolf in us, but we'll need to build up our strength before we can call on it again. She says to be careful, as cowards in this land can't stand the sight of glory before them. I'd say their fear is pretty reasonable given how most werewolves we'll see outside the Companions are ravenous killing machines, but we'll touch on that later. When we ask what it means to be a werewolf, Ayla says it doesn't matter until we use it, then we get stronger and faster. Then she explains what I mentioned earlier, with the blood of our foes sustaining us during our beast form, and that the more we feed, the greater the prowess will grow, which basically means feed to increase your skill point progress for the werewolf tree. We'll ask if there is a cure, and Ayla scoffs at us, saying we sound like the old man. Then she says she shouldn't say that. She loves and respects Kodlak, but says he's wrong about this. It's no curse, and we're made into the greatest hunters in the land. If Kodlak is worried about a mead-swilling afterlife in Sovngarde, he's free to pursue it, while Ayla will take the glories of the hunt right here. This seems somewhat short-sighted on Ayla's part, especially when you realize that Sovngarde is actually real, and so is Hircine, the Lord of Werewolves. We'll learn more about him later, and see how he treats his cubs. Anyway, we'll head over to Gallows Rock and start smacking the Silver Hand around. While we do this, I'll explain some things about lycanthropy and how it compares to other diseases. We'll go over vampirism in more depth when we get to the Dawnguard DLC, but lycanthropy is simple. You can gain this through two means, both involving a quest or quest line, one being the Companions, and the other being the Daedric quest for Hircine, which we'll touch on later. Once you gain lycanthropy in your beast form, it's a done deal. Most diseases are cured by visiting a shrine to any of the divines of the game, which also cures the early stages of vampirism, but lycanthropy is a pass or fail situation. Once you got it all, and it can't be cured outside of one ritual we'll see later down this questline, and by another questline that turns you into a vampire by force. A universal benefit of being either a vampire or a werewolf is that neither of them can contract diseases after becoming one, which is helpful since most diseases are annoying to manage, whether holding cure disease potions all the time or having to visit shrines over and over. This will become an issue during the Dawnguard DLC, as vampirism is rampant during that questline, so lots of potions will be consumed once we get there, but that's for another video. Getting back to the quest at hand, we'll head inside the fort with Ayla saying the cowards locked the way after Skjor charged in. We'll cut down silver dilvers and find a werewolf corpse. Ayla will mention that the scent doesn't match anyone we know, and goes on to say that some can't separate the animal from themselves and go feral. That would have been good to know before we decided to become one. But let's move on. We'll fight through more Sylvie Kilbies as we look around a prison area where we can find a live werewolf. We'll open the door for the werewolf where he or she becomes hostile, so we'll kill him and move on. The Silver Hand are notably weak here, even without the aid of beast form, so going through this area should be a breeze unless on higher difficulties. Before we reach the final area, Ayla will mention that the leader of the Silver Hand is a tricky one called the Skinner, which we can guess why. We'll barge into the next room and clear out the enemies and find Skjor dead. Ayla laments his death, saying he was one of the strongest we had, but he shouldn't have come without a shield brother. Ayla tells us to leave, and then says she's going to make sure we got the last of the silver bilvers and see if there's any information to be gotten from the bodies. She says we have work to do, and the quest ends. That werewolf pride seems like a killer, doesn't it? Instead of leaving, we'll ask Ayla for our first target, and she points us to a camp at a random location with plans we'll need to steal. Then we'll loot Skjor's armor and head out. No point letting it go to waste. We'll return to Kodlak to tell him of Skjor's death, with the Harbinger saying he should not have gone alone. Then he tells us to grieve in any way we choose to, and we'll leave for Valtheim Towers. Valtheim Towers is a set of 2 towers along the road between Whiterun and Eastmarch, connecting over a river. The bandits here will threaten us with a passage tax when not doing the Companion's quest. But enough of that, we've got Silver Hand to slaughter. We'll eventually find the plans in a chest near the top of one of the towers. Sadly, you can't open the book to read the plans, which is such a letdown given how much you're able to read elsewhere in the game. Another thing worth mentioning is that this quest won't always be the follow-up to the Silver Hand, as the quest Retrieval can appear. Retrieval basically has Ayla send us to find a fragment of Wuthred at a random location. I didn't get this quest during this run, and it seems to be common that this quest has an issue, where people won't get it unless reloading Ayla's Radiant quest several times over. It's a weird issue to have, but it doesn't affect the questline at all, so I'll give it a pass. When we return to Ayla, she says she's been running interference for us, and doesn't think anyone's caught on to our little campaign yet. We'll give her the plans, and she says this will hopefully let us know more about the Silverhand's movements, and she thinks we've got them on the run. Just wait and see how wrong she is. We'll then ask for our next target, and be told to head to Hjalmarch to find a group of Silverhand there. Again, this will be a randomized location in the game. We'll head over to Orotheim, a cave, where we'll feast on all those that fear cute puppies. Then we'll return to Ayla once they're all wiped out. She says it looks like we've driven them into hiding, and if we keep this up, we'll wipe them out. Then we'll move into the next quest, as this was a short one. When we ask for work, Ayla will point us to Kodlak, as he's gotten wind of our recent activities and wants to see us. Ayla advises that we should be honest, but don't tell him anything he doesn't need to know. We'll have a seat, and Kodlak says he's heard we've been busy. We'll say that we're working to avenge Skjor's death. Then the old man says our hearts are full of grief, as is his at the loss of Skjor. But his death was avenged long ago, as we've taken more lives than honor demanded. The cycle of retaliation may continue for some time, but he has a task for us. He'll then ask if we've heard the story of how the Companions came to be werewolves. One little thing I appreciate is how you can choose a pro-werewolf or anti-werewolf answer for this. We'll give the pro-werewolf answer. with Kodlak saying it sounds like Skjor to say such a thing. But as in all matters of faith, the reality is more complicated than one believer would tell us. Then Kodlak explains some of the history of the companions, as they are nearly 5,000 years old, and the matter of beast blood has only troubled them for a few hundred. One of Kodlak's predecessors was a good, but short-sighted man, who made a bargain with the witches of Glenmoral Coven. If the companions would hunt in the name of their lord Hircine, they would be granted great power. They became werewolves, not believing the change would be permanent. The witches offered payment, like anyone else, but the companions were deceived. They are more powerful now, as the witches didn't lie, but it affected more than their bodies. The disease affects not just their bodies, but seeps into the spirit. Upon death, werewolves are claimed by Hircine for his hunting grounds. For some, this is a paradise, as they want nothing more than to chase prey with their master for eternity, and that is their choice. But Kodlak is a true Nord, and wishes for Sovngarde to be his spirit home. We'll ask if there is a way to cure himself, and Kodlak says he's spent his twilight years trying to find this out. He's found an answer, as the witch's magic ensnared them, and only their magic can release them. They won't give it willingly, but we can extract their foul power by force. Then Kodlak sends us to seek them out in their coven in the wilderness. We'll strike them down as a true warrior of the wild, bringing their heads to Kodlak. These are the seat of their abilities, and then we may begin to undo centuries of impurity. When asked if we're to do this alone, Kodlak says we won't have a shield brother this time, but the spirit of Ysgramor goes with us to restore the honor of his legacy. Then we'll be off. The optional aspect of this quest to wipe out all the Glenmoral witches should be considered when you complete this quest, as there is later content requiring more heads than the one we'll need for Kodlak. We'll reach the witches' cave and find that they are hag ravens, explaining how they managed to live for so long after cursing the companions. We'll turn their curse back on them, as we rip them and their pests limb from limb. There are 5 witches in total, with the player needing a total of 3 for quests later. If you want to cure yourself as well, you'll need 4. We'll head back to Jorvaskr to find the companions armed and outside, along with Silverhand bodies. They were attacked while we were away, and we'll head inside. Vilkas dejectedly asks where we've been, and will explain we were doing Kodlak's bidding. Vilkas then says he hopes it was important, because it means we weren't here to defend him. The Silverhand finally found the courage to attack Jorvaskr, and they killed the old man and ran off with all of our fragments of Wuthrad. Then Vilkas says we're going after them, and will bring the battle to their chief camp. There will be none left living to tell their stories. Only songs of Jorvaskr will be sung. We'll avenge Kodlak, and they will know terror before the end, as we head into the next quest. From here, we'll head over to Driftshade Refuge, where we'll feast on the blood of those who took our beloved Kodlak from us. We'll enjoy completing the optional objective to wipe out the Silver Hand, before we reclaim the fragments of Wuthrad. Then we'll return to Jorvaskr to pay our respects to Kodlak. When we return to Whiterun, the quest will end, and we'll head into the next one. Short and sweet, the way revenge should be. We'll head up to the Skyforge for the funeral of Kodlak, and join in the chant. Before the ancient flame, we grieve. At this loss, we weep. For the fallen, we shout. And for ourselves, we take our leave. Then Ayla will light the funeral pyre, saying his spirit is departed, and asks the members of the circle to withdraw to the Underforge to grieve our last together. Yorland will catch us before we head to the Underforge, asking if we have the fragments of Wuthrad, as he'll need them to prepare them for mounting. We'll give him the fragments, and then he'll point us to the final fragment that Kodlak always kept close to him. We'll find the shard in Kodlak's quarters and his journal, which entails a dream he has of the line of harbingers starting with Ysgramor as they enter Sovngarde, until Turfig, the one who turned them to the way of the beast, is set upon by a great wolf, who pulls him into the hunting grounds where Hircine laughs with welcoming arms. Turfig seems regretful, but also eager to join Hircine after a lifetime of service as a beast. Then Kodlak sees every next harbinger turn away from Sovngarde and enter the hunting grounds of their own accord until it comes to him. He sees Soon, the guy we saw during the main quest guarding the bone bridge to Shor's Hall, who is beckoning Kodlak, as it appears he has a choice. And then, at his side, a stranger he had not seen before appears, and as he looks into their eyes, they turn to see the same wolf who dragged away Turfig, and they draw weapons together. Kodlak realizes this is only a dream, but a strong enough dream to inspire him to put ink to parchment. Then he recalls telling the other members of the circle about it, minus the stranger, for fear of Skjor worrying Kodlak will no longer accept his counsel. He was not surprised to see them torn by it. Ayla and Skjor sided with the beast, suggesting that the hunting grounds would be their choice of an afterlife, if it is a choice. Vilkas seemed most troubled, as he is as fierce as a saber cat in battle, but his heart's fire burns too brightly at times. He felt deceived, and Kodlak doesn't blame him. Farkas didn't know what to think, but Kodlak believes he would come around to his brother and Kodlak, as he usually does. Kodlak says he doesn't know what to do about Skjor and Ayla, as they respect the companions, but take to the blood more deeply than the rest of them. Kodlak then says fortune smiles upon them, as Vilkas was telling him how difficult it had been for him to give up transformations. Until they can pursue a true cure, the twins and the Harbinger have chosen to not give in to the beast blood. For Kodlak, it's provided a clearer head, but Vilkas seems to be suffering a bit for it. Farkas seems completely untroubled, amazing Kodlak with his fortitude. While Vilkas was confiding with Kodlak, he saw the stranger from his dream appear, which is obviously the player. Then Kodlak recounts some of the events we experienced during the questline. Then we get to see our name planted firmly in a book of a wise man. Revel in it. Revel in it. Anyway, Kodlak says he holds the details of our involvement in his dream to himself, and that he's been looking into the cure, even with his disdain for magic. Then he says he's amazed that Ayla thinks she can keep a secret among this drunken rabble, and he knew of our war against the Silver Hand. He also mentions that he's learned to trust what few dreams he has, along with his heart. Kodlak then explains why we're a good fit for Harbinger compared to the rest, especially with the loss of Skjor. Ayla is too solitary, Vilkas too fiery, and Farkas too kind-hearted. Then he mentions coming to us for the aid in witch hunting, and we've caught up to our current state. We'll return to Yorland with the final shard, and he points us to the Underforge as the circle is waiting for us. When we head inside, we'll hear Vilkas saying the old man had one wish before he died, and he didn't get it, and it's as simple as that. Ayla retorts that being Moonborn is not so much of a curse as he might think, but given the context that both Kodlak and Skjor died because of Moonborn decisions, I'd advise not to bring that up now. Vilkas says it's fine for her, but Kodlak wanted to be clean. He wanted to meet Ysgramor and know the glories of Sovngarde, but that was taken from him. Ayla then says we avenged him, before Farkas says Kodlak didn't care for vengeance. Vilkas agrees with his brother, saying that's not what this is about. Then he says we should be honoring Kodlak, no matter our own thoughts on the blood. Ayla comes around, saying it's what Kodlak wanted, and he deserved to have it. Then Vilkas says Kodlak used to speak of a way to cleanse his soul, even in death, and reminds us of the legends of the tomb of Ysgramor. Ayla recalls that it is there the souls of the Harbingers will heed the call of Northern Steel. Then she says we can't even enter the tomb without Wuthrad, and it's in pieces, like it has been for 1,000 years. Then we hear Yorland as he says dragons were just stories, and elves once ruled Skyrim. He says just because something is, doesn't mean it must be. A blade is a weapon, a tool, and tools are meant to be broken and repaired. Vilkas asks if he's repaired the blade, and Yorland says this is the first time he's had all the pieces. Then he gives a quote: "The flames of a hero can reforge the shattered. The flames of Kodlak shall fuel the rebirth of Wuthrad, and will take us to meet him once more." As the one who bore the fragments, Yorland thinks we should be the one to carry Wuthrad into battle. The rest of the circle will prepare for the journey to the tomb of Ysgramor. Then we'll head out to give Kodlak the afterlife he wanted. When we inspect Wuthrad, it is especially deadly to elves, dealing an additional 20% damage to them. It's a very racist weapon, which is hilarious. Before you head out, make sure to bring the witch heads, as you can move them out of your inventory, so make sure you bring at least one for Kodlak. We'll reach Ysgramor's tomb along the northern coast of Skyrim, and we'll head inside. Vilkas will tell us this is the resting place of Ysgramor and his most trusted generals, so we should be cautious. We'll infer that Vilkas isn't coming with us, and he'll say Kodlak was right, as Vilkas let vengeance rule his heart. He regrets nothing of what we did at Driftshade, but he can't go any further with his mind fogged, or his heart grieved. We'll ask why we need to be cautious, and Vilkas explains that the original companions and their finest warriors rest with Ysgramor. We'll have to prove ourselves to them. He mentions that it's not that we're intruding, and he'd wagered they'd been expecting us. They just want to be sure we're worthy, so we'll need to be ready for an honorable battle. We'll ask how to get inside, and Vilkas says to return Wuthrad to Ysgramor, as that should open the way. We'll place Wuthrad into the statue's hands, and the way will open. You don't have to leave it there, so bring that racist whacker along with you. We'll fight through several rooms filled with animals and ghosts on our way to the final chamber. After a few fights, we'll find a spider nest. Farkas will talk to us, saying he can't go any further as the big crawly ones have been too much for him ever since Dustman's Cairn. Every man has his weakness, and this is his. He's not proud, but he'll stay back with his brother and asks us to give his regards to Ysgramor. We'll cut through the Spider Den and continue fighting through ghosts until we reach the final area. We'll find Kodlak's ghost, who says that he and his fellow Harbingers have been warming themselves here while trying to evade Hircine. We'll mention that we don't see anyone else here, and he'll explain that we only see Kodlak because we only knew him, and then he bets old Vignar could see half a dozen of his predecessors. Kodlak sees them all, the ones in Sovngarde, and the ones trapped with him in Hircine's realm. They see us as well, and we've brought honor to the name of the companions. We'll mention that Vilkas said he could be cured, and Kodlak can only hope. Then he'll instruct us to throw in one of the witches' heads into the fire. It will release their magic, for Kodlak at least. When we throw a head in, a red wolf spirit will spawn from Kodlak that we'll need to slay to free him. We'll talk to him afterwards, where he says we've slain the beast inside of him. He thanks us for this gift, then mentions the other trapped Harbingers. Perhaps from Sovngarde, the heroes of old can join Kodlak in their rescue. The harrowing of the hunting grounds would be a battle of such triumph. Perhaps someday, we'll join him in that battle. But for today, we'll return to Jorrvaskr and triumph in our victory. He ends off saying we'll lead the companions to further glory, inferring that we are the new Harbinger. Ayla will ask if she heard right, and will ask if this upsets her. She says she's surprised, but our strength and honor are apparent to all. You can loot Ysgramor's shield from a chest nearby, which is cool on its own, but not having a one-handed weapon from Ysgramor to use it with cheapens the overall effect. If Wuthrad was a one-handed weapon, that would work, but we got what we got. In any case, we've completed the Companion's main questline, but we're not done yet. Before we begin some of the repeatable quests, we'll talk to the twins before we leave the tomb. Vilkas will say he didn't expect someone like us to be the Harbinger, but if Kodlak trusted our judgment, he will too. We'll tell him we cured Kodlak, and he'll say we brought honor to him, even in death. We can tell him that the old man said we should lead the companions, even though he already knows, and he'll say that if we told him that a few months ago, that an outsider he never heard of would lead the companions, he might have slit our throat. But he's seen what we can do, and heard of the love and trust Kodlak had for us. He wishes that we can show that his heart was not deceived, and then Vilkas wishes us good luck. When we ask if Vilkas is going back to Jorrvaskr, he says not right now, as he wants to look at some of the carvings around the tomb. He wonders if Ysgramor ever set foot here while he was alive. He says we don't have to stay if we don't want to, and mentions that we probably have stories to tell the others at Jorrvaskr. Now we'll talk to Farkas, who says Vilkas told him we are the new Kodlak. He doesn't know what that means, but we seem honorable, so that's good. We'll go through the same set of dialogue options as with his brother, with him saying that curing Kodlak is a good thing. He'll say we don't have to worry about any problems from him as the new leader, as he does what he's told. Then he congratulates us. He'll also mention that he's staying, as Vilkas wants to look around, and Farkas stays with his brother. We'll return to Jorrvaskr and talk to Jorland, who says that ever since Kodlak's funeral, the Skyforge feels more awake. It's always been said that the souls of the heroes of old are what give Skyforge steel its strength. The Forge knows the greatness of Kodlak's soul, and he can't really explain it, but the Forge feels like it's young. Jorland wagers the Skyforge could create metal the likes of which hasn't been seen since eras long forgotten. That's the end of the main questline for the companions, but we've still got a little bit to do, so let's move on. Now we'll get into some of the repeatable quests I mentioned earlier, beginning with one where a citizen of Whiterun has been kidnapped. Vilkas says we've been asked for assistance, and we shall answer, particularly when the pay is as good as this. Like before, the NPC and hold are randomized for this mission, so let's see where we're headed. We'll reach Silent Moon's camp, a pseudo-crypt and bandit camp where the bandits craft unique weapons that deal bonus damage when the moon is out, which is ironic, given how we came in and wrecked their smithing operation as one of Moonblood. Anyway, we'll find the hostage inside, and we must escort them to an assigned location. This usually involves leading them out of the location they're kept in, and then warping to wherever they need to go. Just make sure you don't do it in werewolf form. You'll freak the hostage out. We'll lead the lady home, and return to Vilkas for our compensation. Our next quest takes us down to Falkreath to deal with vampires, with Farkas mentioning that one bite could turn us into one of them, but we've got lycanthropy, so we're immune. I gotta wonder how many of the Circle know that we're immune to vampirism. We'll head over to wipe out the bloodsuckers and see that we can't feed off vampires, but we can feed off their thralls. I'm not exactly sure why this is the case in the lore or mechanically, but there are plenty of meat bags out there to satisfy our bloodlust, so it's nothing more than a minor issue at best. We'll return to Farkas for our reward. There are other quests that involve killing animals that break into houses, and the aforementioned brawling, but let's move on to another important post-campaign quest for the companions. We'll begin the first of 3 Totems of Hircine quests by talking to Ayla after doing some Radiant quests. She'll say she'd be honored if we joined her in her search. She'll mention overhearing Skjor and Kodlak talking about the Totems of Hircine. They are simple-looking objects that could channel the powers of the werewolf in new directions. But once Kodlak began looking for a cure, she'd wager Skjor didn't bring it up again. Ayla found a book among Skjor's things elaborating on the totems, and will agree to help her find them. This doesn't work the same as a Stage 1, Stage 2, Stage 3 quest, but we'll essentially get the same quest over 3 separate times. We'll have to complete Radiant quests for the companions to unlock each one, but once we've got it, we'll go to a random location and find the totem. Once we have a totem, we'll return to the Underforge and place it on one of the 3 spaces. The first totem we found, the Totem of the Hunt, grants us Detect Life, an ability letting us see regular humans and animals through walls in a hazy outline. Useful for finding where enemies may be hiding, but the compass at the top can do almost the same thing for you, undermining its usefulness a bit. It's still helpful, but not as much as it could have been if it gave a different effect. Perhaps a major stamina regeneration boost for a limited time? Ties in with the whole hunting and adrenaline rush of the chase sort of thing. Anyway, we'll do the same thing with the other 2 totems. The next totem we find, the Totem of Brotherhood, allows us to summon 2 pack members to aid us in combat. They start off as spectral wolves like the ones that came out of Kodlak's ghost, but they can be upgraded via perks all the way up to ghost werewolves. Imagine how terrifying a ghost werewolf is. That'd make for an interesting movie premise. Anyway, we'll grab the final totem, the Totem of Fear, giving us the ability Fear, which causes enemies to flee from us. We can upgrade this via perks in the werewolf tree to use against higher level enemies. This can be useful in combat if you need to focus one enemy at a time, but also makes it harder to kill enemies when they are actively running away from you instead of toward you. It's very dependent on the situation, so that limits the usefulness of it, unless you enjoy chasing after people fleeing from you, in which case, have fun. And with that, that's all the Totem of Hircine stuff. Now we'll be doing another post-questline quest, where we'll cure the twins of lycanthropy, along with ourselves. We'll have to do some Radiant quests beforehand, and then talk to them. We'll start off with Farkas, who says his mind is someplace else when we ask for work. He thinks that Kodlak may be right. As a werewolf, Farkas can't be a good Nord. He wants to be clean like Kodlak and go to Sovngarde when he finally dies. For this quest, we'll simply take Farkas and Vilkas back to the Tomb of Ysgramor and kill their wolf spirits as we did with Kodlak. The only differences are we can use the shortcut to get straight to the chamber instead of fighting through a huge crypt, and their spirit wolves are blue rather than red. Whether this is because of the difference in age or time spent with the beast blood, that's left up to us to figure out. Anyway, when we kill the ghost, Farkas will say that it's like relaxing into a warm mug of spiced mead, and he's losing aches he didn't know he had. This is how a warrior should feel, alive and aware, and not clouded with thoughts of the hunt. He'll thank us for the help, and say he'll stay a while as his shame kept him out before, but now he wants to see it. Now for Vilkas. We'll have to complete a Radiant quest for him before he'll give similar dialogue to his brother, saying there is a more personal task before him. Like his brother, he recalls Kodlak's final teaching, and thinks he was right about the beast blood and Sovngarde. He wishes to cleanse himself that he might know glory in the afterlife. Then we'll take him through the same process as before. Once his pup is kicked, he'll say it's like waking up from a dream. He can breathe more deeply now, and can't smell our heart beating the way he used to, but his mind is clear. He'll thank us, and say he's going to spend some time communing with Ysgramor, as his soul is clean now. Perhaps he'll still welcome Vilkas when his time comes. Now it's just us. We'll throw a witch head in and cleanse ourselves of the beast blood, admittedly on a new character because I foolishly deleted a save. Now we're a real boy. Again. Anyway, in the event you cure yourself and wish to return to the beast blood, you can talk to Ayla where she will say Hircine doesn't usually bestow his favor on the fickle, but she'll try to help. We'll fade to black and reappear with lycanthropy again. Would have been nice to recreate the ritual from earlier instead of a lazy fade to black and then we got it, but the speed of it is convenient. And with that, we're done with the companions. With the companions quest completed, we'll be moving on to the next major quest line. We'll be tackling different things in different videos, so stay tuned for more. There will be a link to my game commentary playlist in the description, so keep an eye on that if you want to watch my other stuff, or if you want to find where all the Skyrim videos will be. Hopefully it won't take me long to make each video, and I should be able to tackle each one quickly. I will mention again that this was more of a walkthrough with critical commentary, as opposed to a full analytical breakdown or critique, but that is coming in the final video of this series. Keep that in mind and bear with me, as I know this is taking a while to get there. For now, I'd just like to thank you all for watching, and God bless.